This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Antoine Dupont of website builders.
1952. The last time Fiji beat Australia in rugby union, there wasn't a World Cup. The last time Fiji beat Australia in rugby union, the game was amateur, different. Photographs are only source, which is disappointingly familiar to those watching this video. In 1952, Bill Beaumont was just 5 months old. Alan Wynne-Jones was just 21 years old. None of the 87 generation who would go on to upset Argentina and make a first Fijian quarterfinal were born. James Bond didn't exist. Everything in the world was black and white. A box of eggs cost 18p and the average house price was $2,000. And now that box of eggs would cost you $2,000 and buying a house is only possible if you sign for Saracens. Fiji have done it again. In 1952, Fiji were playing just their 28th international, their first against what we'd now call a Tier 1 nation. They entered without fear, and now in their 23rd game against Australia, they've done it again. The spirit of Superboot, the destiny of De La Salle, coursing through Fijian veins. So how did the Flying Fijians do it, and how concerned should Australia be ahead of what is now an absolute must-win game against Cymru? Fiji have previously reached the quarterfinals twice, in 87 and 2007, and the thing those two teams had in common that's perhaps lacking from a lot of the Fijian sides either side was a really strong kicking game that allowed them to open up elsewhere. In 87, it was the freakish skill and 80-metre range of fullback Severo Superboot Korodua that saw them win enough territory in an era where a knock-on was only ever 2 passes away to press and unlock for the likes of Tomasi Farmer Sr. to score some scintillators. Whilst in 2007, Season 10 Nicky Little's boot gave them a plan B to the full-on Fijian open-field, open-jaw game plan, and one which allowed them to squeeze the life out of Wales all day long. However, 2023's Fiji are for me the best of the lot. The most complete, composed and tied up Fiji side of all time. In the last World Cup, we saw Fiji's attack stand out whilst the rest of the game tried to withstand. Their game about hiding and minimising weaknesses through putting all focus on the big boy strengths. A great deal of focus has gone into how Raiwa Lui has improved Fiji's foundations, but the most exciting thing is how much further he's gone than that. Every part of the Flying Fijians game now feeds into the next. To put how Fiji play down to just skill or athleticism is frankly patronising to them. Their game is like a living, breathing organism, every piece feeding the next and making it stronger in a similar way to the Razzie Erasmus Springboks, except instead of ultimately feeding upwards to the goal of squeezing the life out of the opposition, the Fijian pyramid is heading towards the attack. The 2019 box attack, kicking game, tactical play all ultimately fed into their defence and set piece to make it as effective as possible. All parts of their game were trying to work towards the same goal because those two aspects of their game were the best in the world, the best of any team in the competition, and they wanted it all to lead to that, allowing them to remain in control of the game by emphasising what they do best in all areas because it's leading to the stuff they boss. And instead of hiding their scrum or D, Fiji have taken the same approach, but instead trying to make it all underline the Faufabuka enormous rapid flair. Fiji's scrum and line-up bolsters attack, which feeds their kicking. The kicking allows them to be freakish at the breakdown, which bolsters their attack, which bolsters their kicking, which allows them to use that scrum and line-up, which improves the attack. This is a perfect example, and I once again apologise for having to use stills, blame Sir William Blackledge Beaumont. Australia send this drop out long, and Drew Sese, who was outstanding, hangs it right in the air. The chase is outstanding, he nails Nawangi Tanase, Australia kick it back, and Fiji happily return their first kick. But a beauty by Marky Mark splits the Fijian cover, bouncing and leaving Teller regathering on his 5-metre line. If Fiji run here, they're going up a blind alley, this blind alley in particular, and Drew Sese is likely getting turned over. If he kicks in field, it's giving Australia a perfect chance to counter-attack with the Fijian forwards all over the shop. Look at them. Look at them. One of them's in Tesco, one of them's in bloody Casino, which is the name of a supermarket over here in France. Mad. Had to tell my bank about it. Instead, he instantly concedes and looks for touch, banging it as long as possible, allowing the next part to come into play. Oz win line-up ball cleanly, but check how Fiji are lined up to defend. Off a non-8-man line-out, most teams place the forwards have dropped into the line opposite the opposition's biggest carriers to stop their momentum, make a big shot right off the bat. Fiji instead have bloody massive centres and are able to put Joshua Tuasova and Wasia Naisalevu opposite Karevi and Valentini here, with Bottia instead just off to the side, which allows him to then dictate when and how he enters contact when he hits the breakdown instead of doing it on the Aussie ball carrier's terms. He gets in right as Karevi's hitting the deck and strips the ball. It's phenomenal, and he instantly launches onto the attack. In past off similar turnovers, the topic of conversation was always how good in broken field the freakish Fijian athletes were, but with modern defences transitioning so fast, the RFU would probably ban them from playing without any any reason or evidence, that's a much harder job these days. But this Fiji team are so fast into shape because they're always expecting it back, and their defence is built to shift into attack as much as it is to stop the opposition's attempt to do the same. Nice that Levu carries here, and Fiji set into an uber flat 1-3-3-1, which is spread over the width, yet the two central groups are so tight, it's closer to being a 1-6-1. It's something we also see here in this club against England, which I can actually show. It happened a bunch in Australia again, but I'm going to use this example just because I can bloody show it and it's easier. Fiji win unexpected ball here from a shoddy grubber by England and get into that 1-3-3-1 almost instantly, because if we rewind to just here, as a still again, Fiji were already defending in a 1-3-3-1. The centres dotted in to help organise the line. This snapshot here is so much closer to being an attacking formation, Randrandra the first receiver and Nisa Levu in the boot. This means once the ball is recovered, they can adopt almost exactly into the shape. They were already basically there. Semi slips in behind and winger Ravatumada slides into the fullback position to mean there's several passing options for everyone. They crash it up first phase, which contracts the transitioning English defence. The second forward group pulling it then out the back to Randrandra, who is indeed in that boot, and then floats it over the top. It's not the best ball he's ever thrown in his life, but it still allows Fiji to bullock forwards and milk a penalty. A better pass, and this could have been a real chance to get up into the 22 if not to score a try. Not off Fijian counter-attacking flair, but off smart organisation in their defence, allowing it to transition into the attack smoothly to get the most out of their dangerous players in space in that width against a weaker aligned defence. This shape also allows for an incredibly clean transition into attack, and the 1-6-1 shape allows for that continuity, be it offloads or lovely pick and goes like this. The extra yardage means Slipper and Valentini, the previous tacklers, are still retreating onside and hence unable to fold around to the short side because there's so much further to run now. Frost, who's gesturing for others to get over there with him, is forced to step in and act as the guard, opening a huge gap inside Crevy, which he's aware of, but it's better to leave the space just next to the ruck rather than at the ruck. Teller holds the ball just long enough to fix him, though, you know, this is a still, so he could be holding for any length of time in the world, slowing the Aussie drift before freeing to Asova, whose pass can't find Randrandra, but if it does, this is one sitch where still does help, because this looks like a pretty clean-cut try-scoring chance for me for a player as good as semi-bloody Randrandra. Because, hey, he's not dropping that pass on the wing twice. And interestingly, their shape has also evolved over the two games so far. Against Wales, they primarily played direct structures, telecalling shapes designed to disguise which beef boy was making a beeline for the gain line. Even when working wide, Fiji would start a structure straighter than Israel allows wet dreams in order to keep the Welsh defence from drifting, which it loves to do. But this week, they adopted the France-style stretch formation, playing much wider, much quicker. Players now starting narrow and drifting apart in order to go on the outside, and Marika Corambetti in particular, who loves to defend tight and work back out. The last game between Fiji and Georgia ended as a draw, but if Fiji adapted in their shape subtly like this, whilst keeping ideas and identity identical every week, it could give them a real edge over their fellow tier 1.5 rivals, assuming they've done their homework. Because homework was just the word, a key word in Fiji's preparation. Knowing he needed his boys to learn a more varied playbook, Raiwalui took his team straight to Squarespace. Players who didn't respond to normal notebooks will run over instantly at this beautiful, stunning website that Raiwalui built in order to walk through all of his plays, the ideas, the tactics he wanted to be putting in place. Suddenly, learning became fun. Playbooks were memorized instantly at one single glance by every single player, having formatted them all into easy to read, easy to reach websites, able to add players to mailing lists, able to integrate the entire site to social media so nobody ever need miss a change or amendment, all being processed automatically thanks to Squarespace's fantastic features. Homework all of a sudden became fun. And if you want to do the same, please head to the link in the description and use the offer code SQUIDGRUGB to save yourself a whole bunch of money on subscribing to Squarespace. It's such a good deal. Where the 87 and 07 teams were attacking sides with good kicking games tacked on, 2023 Fiji's boot-based game is just a composed part of everything else. It's all part of one cohesive system, like France, Scotland or New Zealand, kicking in order to open up space and find opportunities to attack, because the kicking game did a really good job of halting Aussie momentum, which then grabs them territory, which then gets their defence into the game, which allows them to use their breakdown work to unlock the attack, which is baked into the attack, where their forward's superb pick and go game opens up space for the backs to do their thing. Everything is connected, every moment of luck worked for and earned for a thriving ecosystem of superb rugby feeding on itself. Like if the snake from Snake had a breakdown. Their only try didn't come from what we might call Fijian shit, but instead from being more accurate in a kicking battle. Carter Gordon mistiming his jump and giving Tuasova a run-in. This try is luck, right? But Fiji kicked the ball 52 times on Sunday, 10 more than England for context, so everyone's talking about kicking bloody everything, and their chase on every single one was just as forceful and just as committed. If you work this hard, you're bound to get lucky one time in every 52. That's what Fiji are gambling on. All of which makes the Fijians a formidable task for any opposition, and yet this was such a different game to the 07 demolition of Wales or the 87 Puma knockout. This was an evenly matched arm wrestle where Fiji came out on top. Because here's the thing, even having watched it 3 times now, it's really hard to quantify this Wallaby performance to know how good they were. In minutes 0 through 10 and 40 through 69 last week, Wales gave us a masterclass in how you beat this Fijian team. As shown in the earlier example, when the opposition get on top in a kicking battle, Fiji instantly look for touch. They're not interested in facilitating you or engaging in that battle that isn't going to feed the rest of their game if they're not going to be able to get on top of themselves. So Wales play the corners constantly, generally kicking flat in wide positions because Fiji like to bring the winger and fullback up to spook attacking players, allowing Wales to find space behind. This forced Fiji into positions where they were only reacting, hence disrupting the entire organisation. The entire Fijian game suddenly fell off just because Wales were putting them in awkward positions. Their kicking was now on Welsh terms, so their defence now was as well, and suddenly things start to fall apart and they start to concede more tries than they'd have expected. Wales were really quite dumb from minute 10 to 40 and 70 through 80, abandoning tactics that were being incredibly effective in favour of listening to your dad telling them to stop bloody kicking the ball all the time. But those 2 passages were exceptional and won them the game. Eddie Jones looked at this, adopted it, and then adapted it, mate. Instead of aiming for touch as Wales did, Australia wanted to keep the ball in field. Where Wales craved a full set-piece defence in their face, Australia wanted to remove Fiji's time to weigh up the options and try to get them to kick it back while panicking, or allow Australians to flatten them and win it back immediately, cutting out the middleman. If this sets up for Drew Esse, Korombete is smashing him so far over the touchline he'll end up in the coach's box, and even if it stays in play, the next closest player is Valentini, granting a great turnover chance. However, like so many Wallaby kicks, it just dribbles too long and goes over the dead ball. I don't know if I've ever seen a team put as many kicks dead as Australia did this weekend. Tactics that frankly were working, were good, were sound, were going to work, were nullifying Fiji pretty well whenever they did click, and probably would have continued to do so if not for the fact that rugby balls bounce. Tactically, the Wallabies got Sunday right, but in execution, they weren't 10% off, they were 10% over. And with a team as good as this Fiji side, you need to be absolutely dead on. We saw this in particular in defence, as Wales and Australia took very different approaches to stopping Fiji. Defensively, Wales focused on fitness. The side made an all-time World Cup record of 253 tackles, largely because most of their shots were soak-up tackles, passive, just getting guys to ground so they can get back up on their feet quickly. Australia, indeed, prioritised physicality, looking to make huge dominant shots and seize their momentum, and it worked. Except the problem was, Fiji were almost always capable of finding that momentum again, almost immediately, and now Australia had committed bodies, effort and energy to something that ended up feeling perfunctory. The end of the first half threatened to cost Fiji, as Australia quite easily repelled them from several kicks at the corner, but they just followed up by taking the game by the scruff of the neck right after half-time. This here is another example. It's a brilliant kick by Fines Lewiasi, and the toing and throwing chasing it leaves the Fijian defence totally shuffled and allows Valentini to almost break right through, the team getting up to the 22 before momentum just swings in an instant with Semi Andrando winning a huge turnover. There's hundreds of these examples I could pull out that, I'd just be showing you pictures of though. Because we then got the exception that proves the rule in that last 15 minutes that was so tense. With less than 10 to go, Fiji happily engage Australia in a kicking exchange here. Tactics shifted, now happy to go back and forth when Australia on top to just run the clock down. Eventually they get good enough chase on Vunivalu that he gives Fiji territory and possession under enormous pressure. After that victory at Twickenham, head coach Simon Raului said he pushed the team to be as fit as possible because, and I quote, "Fitness gives you clarity." And that's exactly what took Fiji through that final 50 minutes. Fiji were fit, but Fiji was smart. They didn't overplay, and they didn't have to make any compromises on their game plan as such. The kicking remained as accurate as ever, the chase as relentless as ever, and it allowed the rest to just slide into place for the first time since 1952. Eggs might be more expensive and houses harder to come by, but the sheer joy of the Islanders upsetting a Tier 1 nation won't change. Whether we have to wait 3 weeks or 5 decades to see it again. Because for the first time since 2007, Fiji have it in their own hands to get out of the group. And there's a very decent chance they could even go further than that, with likely opponents in that quarterfinal being Japan, who they smashed a few months ago, England, who they beat at home just 4 weeks back, and Argentina, who they somehow haven't played since 2003, but are the same team they upset originally all the way back in Coranduadua's 1987, to pull off their previous best ever Rugby World Cup. The world and this Fiji team might have changed a lot since 1952, but anyone who faces Fiji now must find themselves fearing soon enough, they too might know what it's like to be in a world without a Rugby World Cup to play in. Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. These have been a nightmare working things around. There's an awful lot of scripts that are half made. There's a lot that we kind of can't get to. These are taking so much longer than usual. So apologies about that. I'm currently in a cafe in Nice ahead of Uruguay against Italy. We'll see if that's the next video coming up. We're just going to keep going as we are. Apologies, there's not stuff coming. We're considering doing videos in a normal format, exclusive going out for Patreons. We're trying to work stuff out as we go. There's an awful lot changing with the World Rugby situation. All of it very, very far from ideal. But we will see you soon, regardless, for more rugby, because there's plenty going on, and there's loads we want to be talking about, and it's all been a bit of a nightmare in terms of just getting stuff done. So, see you soon for more rugby.
Tutul buka!